Hey, what is up, everybody? Welcome inside the Guilty as Charged podcast. This is another segment of The More You Know, the 49ers edition. And joining me to do that is a good friend of the show, Mr. Rob Lowder, who is a fellow Bluewire podcaster, fellow Central Valley resident as well. So,
Fellow
really excited
everything.
about this one. Rob, thanks for taking the time to join me tonight, man. How are you doing?
I'm good, dude. I mean, it's my Friday because we get Veterans Day off, and are you still planning on going to the Clovis West game? I know we're both. At least we talked about both trying to go watch some playoff football tonight. So, and the weather's cooling down. I mean,
I
I'm
know.
good, man. I'm great. I'm great.
Yeah, it was a little weird. So I went and did a college tour today, and we took some kids up to UC Merced. Shout out to Merced.
Okay.
And I'm in like this nice little jacket, and I thought that was going to be good, but it was like the whole campus is shaded, and it was like actually kind of cold. So it was a good change up. Like I've said on the show before, we don't have a fall here in the Central Valley. We just go straight from summer to winter.
Pretty
But
much.
yeah, pretty much. So I'll take it. It's not 98 degrees anymore, so it's been fun.
No, I
But
mean it's yeah, especially coaching football. It's like I can't even tell you how much more fun it is during this time of year. Like it's unbelievable. Like you grind through all of summer and the 110 plus just to get
yeah,
to this moment. So it's been nice.
and then right as the weather starts cooling down, the season's over.
Right,
It's
exactly. You wish they would just bump it back just a little bit.
right, right. But obviously, excited for this conversation in general, right? Me and you have been messaging for a few weeks from now. Obviously, this game being on Sunday Night Football, adds an extra element to it. So, should be a lot of fun. I always like to start these conversations just kind of doing, a conversation about the coaches and kind of where they're at. So, we've kind of seen Kyle Shanahan, obviously head coach of the Niners since 2017, get into this kind of transitional phase every single year. It feels like he's losing guys from his coaching staff. And, looking it up this week, I didn't realize that it was 14 different coaching hires this offseason after, losing the various coaches that they have, obviously Mike McDaniel and then Robert Saleh and just that whole crowd. So, what's been how has this new addition of Kyle Shanahan's staff kind of gelled, and what's that process been like for him from your eyes as we've kind of gone through the midway point of the season?
And what there's and maybe it's like this for any NFL team, but we always joke about how the fact that the 49ers have found some weird way to always keep it interesting. And like no matter what, they're always in flux, whether it's good or bad. And this year the coaching staff was one of the biggest changes. I mean, and we've seen it in the team. I mean, I guess the core is always going to be Kyle Shanahan. He's seen as like the nucleus. Everybody's still trying to figure out how much Mike McDaniel meant to him because obviously he's having a ton of success in Miami. Things look like they're going great for him. Um, but it's just kind of, it's like every offensive struggle the 49ers have, someone wants to mention Mike McDaniel.
Mm,
And, because Kyle and Mike have been together for, I want to say like 15 years, something ridiculous. Literally, Mike was with him every step of the way. And this is the first time they've separated. So you're never really knowing what to expect. That being said, I think it's still pretty clear that Kyle knows what he's doing when it comes to play calling and scripting and putting stuff together. D'Amico Ryans has developed quite the reputation for himself. But again, it's always hard to just get a gauge on what this team is fully capable of. And I know Chargers fans and the Chargers community can relate to what I'm about to say, but injuries just constantly toy with this team
hmm
in either incredibly significant ways with the quarterback position, or one will drop here and there. Like they lost their other starting cornerback in Emmanuel Mosley, and then obviously Chargers are worrying about their own cornerback injuries themselves. But it's like you never really understand what the 49ers are truly capable of. And I guess this is just football because everything's in flux, whether it's the coaching staff, the roster, injuries, turnover. I mean, there's maybe two players left from pre 2017. It's like Eric Armstead and Jimmy Ward, and Eric Armstead's not on the field right now, and Jimmy Ward's playing with a club on his hand. So,
mm.
in terms of just the overall, like you never know what to expect with this team. They could get annihilated by the Chiefs, which I guess isn't saying much, and then they can go out and annihilate the Rams twice in a row. You never really know what is what.
Yeah, that 2017 conversation is interesting because Up until a few weeks ago, the only members of the San Diego Chargers still on this team were Joey Bosa and Keenan Allen. And then the Chargers went out and brought back Jeremiah Atauchu for whatever reason. So
I was
now
a
it's up
big
to 3.
Atauchu fan. I liked him coming out of the draft too.
Yeah, obviously wish we, would have been able to hit on that one, but I remember there was a lot of draft love for him that
Oh
particular
yeah.
year. So I want to move a little bit to the quarterback position conversation here, and just a really weird circumstance throughout the whole offseason with Jimmy G. But I don't want to rehash all of that, obviously. But he's back. He's on a reduced contract. How has Jimmy played in your opinion? Is it more of the same? Has he made some kind of adjustment with, essentially being kind of taking a backseat to Trey Lance, or is he really just the same old Jimmy G that we've, kind of come accustomed to seeing?
I think it would be unfair to say that it's like the same old Jimmy Garoppolo, because the running joke with Jimmy G is 90% of his passes don't travel further than 5 to 10 yards down the field at max. And we always had this joke of, if the camera has to pan to go to where the ball is traveling to, everybody kind of holds their breath because you have no idea what to expect with a Jimmy Garoppolo throw. But this year's been different. And you can understand why it would be. There's a little bit of a weight lifted off his shoulders. He's playing essentially on a 1-year deal. It is a 1-year deal. He can't be franchise tagged. The trade has to be approved by him. He's basically, in this glorified audition for every other NFL team or the 49ers again. I mean, I would say that isn't a possibility, but I also said it wasn't a possibility that Jimmy Garoppolo would be on the field in a 49ers jersey right now. So, but he seemed better. He seemed a little bit more improved. Statistically, he's a little better than he usually is. He's almost to like a 3-to-1 touchdown to interception ratio, and that doesn't paint the whole story, but he's clearly been more aggressive. Brandon Ayuk is being fed targets on a much more consistent rate. The ball is flying further downfield than we're really used to. And even if it's not complete, and I'm sure you can relate to this, you just want to see them do it. Whether it's complete or not, just the threat of throwing the ball downfield is something they've got to do. And they've done it way more often this year. So I wouldn't say Jimmy's lit it up, but at the same time, he's been a little more aggressive, and it's been good to see. And I would say that he's still prone to one or two of those, that's a Jimmy Garoppolo throw every game, where you're like, how on earth did he not see that? But
yeah,
in the end, I guess that's just quarterbacking in the NFL. But I think it would be unfair to say this is just the same old Jimmy Garoppolo. He's been a little more free.
interesting. All right, so I'm curious here to get your thoughts, because I still think that the Niners win this division. Potentially make another deep playoff run. If they do, like, what are you doing with Jimmy G at that point? If you go through this again, where maybe you win a couple playoff games, or maybe you just win the one playoff game, like, how do you go back to Trey Lance if you are again successful? Not maybe NFC Championship, but I'm just kind of curious what happens with Trey and Jimmy if the Niners do win the division. They make a playoff run, they win a playoff game.
Right.
What happens at that point?
It's almost like you can like see it happening. Like it's nothing's guaranteed, but you could just see the 49ers doing that again. And they've obviously put themselves in a position where they have to go through and not win every game from here on out, but they've got to win the majority of them. I'd probably say, 80% of what's left. I don't know where they go from there, to be honest. And you got to feel for Trey Lance, because the guy didn't get to play his final year in college because of COVID. He played that one game.
Right.
And then I felt like the 49ers were doing everything right. I felt it was perfectly acceptable to let him come in and spend a season behind Jimmy Garoppolo. Why not? Like, if you can afford a quarterback that luxury, why not? And then it was the absolute worst case scenario where he's finally in his time in the batter's box and he breaks his ankle, which is not common. Now, should Kyle have been running Trey in between the tackles? I don't know. But if you watch Trey Lance in college, like,
that's
the
what he
dude
did.
ran for well over 1,000 yards. Like, it never shocked me that Kyle was willing to do that. It's just a freak injury. Like, how often a running back's a different body, but how often are guys just breaking their ankle on a football field? It just doesn't happen that often. So Trey Lance is in the worst case scenario, and the 49ers are confronted with him being in his third year of his contract and having played like 4 games in 3 years.
Yeah.
So you would have to think they've got to find some way, and I don't think anybody would fault them for this, to keep Jimmy Garoppolo around. Because, and yes, they might be willing to give the keys back to Trey Lance, which no one would blame them for, but like you have to have an insurance policy at this point. You just don't know what you have in him. And it was the same thing as the beginning of this year. You have a roster that's so good that it would be doing them a disservice if you just kind of were like, well, it's Trey or we're all going down.
Yeah, no. Yeah. I mean, that's just such a tough spot to be in, because you'd have to pay Jimmy, and then you'd also have to pay him a lot of money, and then you'd also have to be considering, an extension for Trey Lance at the end of the season. So
they're in a tough spot, and I do not have an answer for it, because if Jimmy Garoppolo continues to play, let's just say he continues playing how he is right now. I mean, at this pace, you played 7 games and he's thrown 11 touchdowns and 4 interceptions. I mean, if you just did the basic, like lazy, extrapolate that over a season, you've got a guy who's playing pretty good quarterback play. Like, a lot of teams would be interested in him, and there would be plenty of teams bidding for him. It would be tough for the 49ers to keep him on the roster.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, well, let's get to this new shiny toy that the 49ers have in Christian McCaffrey. I am so incredibly nervous about this 49ers rushing attack. And I mean, I don't know if Elijah Mitchell is coming back, but it sounds like Debo is going to be back as well. So what did you see against the Rams of how this team used Christian McCaffrey in that really the first full-time game with him against the Rams?
I mean, what didn't you see is probably the best way of saying it. I mean, the dude rushed for a touchdown, he threw a touchdown, and he caught a touchdown. And even the touchdown he caught wasn't like a gimme. He went streaking down the sideline and went up and got it. And the scary thing is obviously McCaffrey has always been like 90% of the Panthers offense, and on a Panthers team that was never that great. So have we not even seen what Christian McCaffrey is fully capable of in an offense that, 1, has other threats, and 2, is quarterbacked by Kyle Shanahan in a way. So I don't think there's really any limitations to what McCaffrey can do in this offense. I think Kyle Shanahan is just salivating at it. And you saw what they traded to get him. A lot of people were like, wow, that's a lot. But then instantly they're probably like, yeah, they probably should have paid more, because he just came in and just lit it up. Luckily, I had him on my fantasy team, which is nice. I got a couple Chargers on my fantasy team too. So it really, I don't think we've fully seen it. That was after a week and a half of being on the team. The big thing that I think is probably the biggest beneficiary is Jimmy Garoppolo, knowing that he can survey the field, go through his reads, knowing in the back of his head that he's probably got McCaffrey in some sort of flat or just, on a screen to don't dole it out to at any point. And that could still be a big play, even though it could be a 3rd or 4th option. He's always got that in his head that he's got McCaffrey there now. And it's interesting. And I was at the game when he played his first snaps in a 49ers uniform, and a player of that caliber stands out. Like when Austin Eckler makes plays, he stands out among NFL players. It's just, they're just built different. It looks different. And that's how McCaffrey looked on the field, was just not like the others, I guess you could say.
Yeah, absolutely. So I went back and watched that Rams game before we we're preparing for our show this week, and I swear there were like 15 Texas choice routes with Christian McCaffrey last week in that game, and they didn't throw it to him every single one, right? But he was open on every single one, and
he has to be accounted for.
Right. Now it just gives them, it gives defenses such a different element to prepare for. And Elijah Mitchell was, a 1,000-yard rusher last year, but like you said, it's just different with him, and he gives you that extra weapon that they didn't really have in the passing game out of the backfield. So I'm very nervous, and again, I think that's just another reason why I think the Niners could really make a push here if things go well for them.
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting element, and when I think a lot of people. Christian McCaffrey was made into almost this just fantasy superstar, but I don't think a lot of people realize what it really means to rush for over 1,000 and catch for over 1,000 in the NFL. Like, that's just unbelievable production. I don't know what kind of run Austin Eckler's on. I'm assuming receiving he'd probably be a little bit less than 1,000. But it's weird to watch a player do those things on the NFL. In terms of what he brings against the Chargers, it's just that's the issue with him is you can't tell me that he's only going to beat you on the ground because that's only half of what he does. And I don't think the Chargers are known for being a particularly good defense against the run, correct?
That is very correct, unfortunately.
So, yeah, but that's again, is that how he's going to beat you? That's how the 49ers want to beat you for sure. As a whole, that's what the offense wants to do. We used to always have this 35 carry threshold. The 49ers will win the game if they carry the ball 35 times. It was just a stat that I kind of built up for myself last year. That's what they want to do. But with Christian McCaffrey, maybe throwing it isn't so bad if he's the one you're throwing it to. So,
Right.
49ers are in this interesting transition right now where they're still very much a rushing team. When you asked about Jimmy Garoppolo, it seems like they're much more willing to sling it around a little bit, given the people they got so many targets to throw it to. Why not?
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll talk about the Chargers run defense and how bad it is on your show after this. But this is a really bad matchup for the Chargers defense, and they're really going to have to come out with their A game. So on the opposite end of the spectrum is the 49ers defense, which is just like unfair, man. Like every single one of their players just plays with their hair on fire. And, Fred Warner and Nick Bosa and Talona Hufanga, man, it's a really fun unit to watch. And I'm very, very jealous in that regard. But in your opinion, who's kind of the engine of this 49ers defense? Because I know that obviously Nick Bosa is arguably like a defensive player of the year candidate when healthy, but to me, like when I watch Fred Warner, man, like I just watched somebody who's different back there. And, in an era that doesn't really value linebackers all that much, to me, Fred Warner is just like, he gives them such a big advantage for the level that he brings from that position.
And I would probably say it's got to be Fred Warner because it's almost like, despite having somebody like Nick Bosa, it's the defense seems like it goes how he goes. And when Fred Warner is struggling, the defense is struggling. When Fred Warner is off his game, the defense is off their game. And we saw against the Chiefs and that you can exploit Nick Bosa if you want to, because he's so aggressive and he's going to try to get into the backfield or get upfield every single play. And if you don't want it, and I get it, you don't want a guy like Nick Bosa holding off so he can read the run. That's just not what you want him doing.
Yeah.
So there's ways to exploit Nick Bosa and alienate him and chip him in a way that you can't do for somebody like Fred Warner. He's in the second level of the defense. So you're not going to get to him as easily as you would a Nick Bosa. And once you've seen Fred Warner is a freaky guy to look at, going to training camp and seeing him in person.
Yeah.
He's a lot of times when you see them list a player at 6'3", you're like, okay, so he's 6'2.5, Fred Warner might be 6'3.5. He's a huge human. And then he goes running down the field covering somebody like Marquise Brown. And you just don't understand what you're seeing. So I agree with you in the fact that, Nick Bosa could be the defensive player of the year if things kind of turn up for him. But the 49ers defense runs through Fred Warner. I mean, he's the guy with the green dot. He's the one calling the plays. He sets the tone. He's the vocal leader. He holds himself accountable if things don't go well. It really is up to him. And I mean, of course it is. He's an all-pro linebacker. But at the same time, when you have that much talent on a defense, you always wonder who really moves the needle. And it's definitely him. And I think that if the 49ers are going to, I feel like despite the fact that the Chargers are down on weapons right now, and it doesn't look like Keenan Allen's trending to play, although Palmer's been pretty good himself, he's holding up his end of the bargain, I guess you could say. It really does depend on how Fred Warner plays. The defensive front will help you stop the run, but everything beyond that, it really is dictated by him. Which is weird to say about a linebacker. Coverage linebackers are a little rare. But he really does set the tone. And if the 49ers are going to hold off somebody like Justin Herbert slinging the ball like he does, and if they're going to have a chance of reeling Austin Eckler in wherever he goes on his routes, it's probably going to be Fred Warner close behind.
Yeah, absolutely there. In terms of the personnel, I have one more question here. Obviously, the 49ers secondary goes through some significant changes this year. Obviously, lose K'Wan Williams, Jaquiski Tartt, guys who have been around for a long time. You go out and sign a big contract corner in Charvarius Ward. How has the backside of the 49ers defense kind of developed this year under D'Amico Ryans and that leadership on defense?
That was the biggest, I think. You could call it a sign of encouragement. The biggest thing to wonder how much there's always the age old. Well, do you want pass rush or do you want coverage?
Right.
If you can get both, then you're at a sweet spot. And for the first time since they've been here, Kyle Shanahan and D'Amico Ryans got both. And Emmanuel Mosley was playing extremely well for an undrafted free agent guy that they kept around for another year. And Charvarius Ward was as advertised. There was a point there in the season. He had a rough game against the Chiefs, as most teams do. But there was a point there where he was among the NFL leaders in terms of pass breakups and I think yards allowed per route type of deal. He was doing really, really well. And you were seeing the 49ers defense that just was brutal because the coverage was sound and the pass rush was coming after him. Little bit of some chinks in the armor. Jimmy Ward got hurt, came back. Everybody's excited for that. Immediately got hurt, broke his hand, I believe, on the opening special teams play. Goodness. He's back out there playing with, like a little bit of a club. Charvarius Ward was dealing with a groin injury against the Chiefs that seems to be in the past. And then it's kind of whoever's stepping up opposite him. That if I'm going to target someone in that defense, it's going to be the corner playing opposite Charvarius Ward, whether that's Diamador Lenore or that's if it's Ambry Thomas, as much as he essentially sent the 49ers to the playoff at the end of last season with a game-sealing interception, but he's the one that defenses are going to go after. And it seems like the 49ers haven't entirely figured out who is going to be the guy opposite Charvarius Ward. And then obviously, I guess we can't really go any further without offering our football condolences to Jason Verrett, can we?
I know, man. It's so sad. Like I said this on Twitter today, but one of the best corners I've ever seen when healthy. And he's got like 2 ACLs, 2 Achilles, like a torn hamstring at this point. It sucks, man. Hate to see it.
I know. He had that one season with the 49ers where anybody you put in front of him, and obviously he's shown with the Chargers, just that clip of him, I think it's covering Antonio Brown, where he flips his hips like 4 times on the route. One of the coolest things I've ever seen. And he had that one season with the 49ers. I can't remember if it was the year where they went to the Super Bowl, but he was he was locking up DeAndre.
2020.
Yeah, he was locking up DeAndre Hopkins, and it was just unreal how good he was. And I can't imagine how frustrating it is for him to just basically, like, your body is just against you. And he's probably not doing anything wrong in the world. He's probably seen every doctor he could see about preventing these types of injuries and what type of diet he should have and how he should prepare. And he just tears his Achilles in practice, man. That's all when I quote tweeted it on Twitter, all I wrote was just heartbreaking because it's just so brutal. He's an incredible talent and all he wants to do is play football and he can't. And it sucks, man. Sometimes it's just not very fair.
Rehabbing from one injury like that is hard, right? But all these other ones just stacking up. I just hope that he's able to live like a healthy life at this point, down the road. So,
right. At least he's gotten paid while he's, while he's been under these injuries, and he has something to take from here. Because you got to assume that this might be it for him. Mm-hmm. And you could have assumed that 2 season-ending injuries ago, but. And he just kept coming back, and that just shows you how much he wants to play. His body is just having none of it, and it sucks, man. It really does. There's a lot of people, there's a lot of fake empathy out there, but it's impossible just not to feel gutted for the guy because it's clear he wants to do it. He just can't.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think that's a good place to end this portion of our conversation.
on a
sad note to Jason Verrett, man. Shout out, one of the great Chargers what ifs and Niners as well. So, Rob, thanks for joining me tonight, man. Where can Chargers fans go find you if they want some good 49ers intel ahead of the game on Sunday night?
Well, that's the Twitter handle right there at Rob_Lowder. And that's pretty much it. I mean, it's funny doing a podcast thing. Like I try to tweet, I tweet a lot on game day, but all my other thoughts and feelings, I feel like I get out on the pod and I don't have to tweet them. So I'm a little lazy on Twitter these days, but I definitely shot one out for Jason Verrett. But that's the Twitter handle right there. So if you're looking for the 49ers game day stuff, I suppose you could wander over there.
There we go. Appreciate it. So again, Chargers fans, make sure and go check out the Striking Gold podcast on on whatever podcast platform you get your podcast. So Rob, thanks so much, man. Looking forward to it. Looking forward to the game. And we'll chat in a little bit here on your show. So that's gonna do it for us today, guys. We will talk to you soon.